In 2023, police found 83-year-old Willimina Deveraux dead in her home. That same week, 12 people across New Orleans reported amputating their own fingers. What connected these events was a package containing something that shouldn't even exist. Every morning, I deleted Jake's voicemails without listening, and every night, I scrolled through his new fiance's photos until my phone died. When that package arrived addressed to someone else, I knew I shouldn't open it, but after 3 months of being completely invisible, I needed someone, anyone, to want something from me. And now I was 34 and alone, and about to buy the only house in New Orleans that I could afford. The realtor's hand shook when she handed me the keys. I thought it was just, the January cold. I should have known better. Because, along with the good vibes and the blues of the Big Easy, there is a dark underbelly of evil, which I was about to face. Even in the daylight, the French Quarter felt wrong. Music from empty bars and voodoo shops with real bones in the windows, and tourists taking ghost tours past my new house without realizing the real horror was inside. I got this house for a song. The woman living there had gotten dementia and was put into state care, and it was only after I signed that dotted line that I heard these rumors of what she did to that neighborhood teen. It seems that she caught him stealing, and then she whispered something in his ear, according to 2 of his friends. And then 3 days later, that kid put out both of his eyes with a rusted fork. I put down the neighborhood rumors as stuff of urban legend. God, I wish I'd listened. But I ignored those warnings because that's what desperate people do. And the night before I moved in, I sat in my empty apartment, scrolling through Jake's Instagram. He was in Cabo with his new fiance. I threw my phone against a wall so hard that it actually cracked. And that's when I noticed the missed call. The realtor was trying one last time to talk me out of this house. But look, I needed this, okay? I needed something that was mine. Even if it was broken, it was mine. Maybe especially because it was broken. My first night in the house, I learned its language. The pipes, they didn't just creak, they sobbed. The walls didn't just settle, they whispered. And every mirror was tilted slightly, like the house had been trying to avoid its own reflection. When I straightened one, it was crooked by morning. And the previous owners had nailed all the cabinet doors shut. I found out why when they started opening by themselves. The morning that I moved in, I found a dead bird on the doorstep. And no, not just dead, hollowed out, like its skin was still perfect but completely empty inside. And next to it must have been a child's drawing in chalk. A stick figure with X's for eyes, missing a finger. And the rain had washed it away before I could take a photo, but I keep finding that same drawing inside the house, inside a cabinet, in places that I know that I have already cleaned. But that night, I found all the mirrors had turned to face each other, and in their reflections, I saw some small, dark dart between them. But when I turned around, there was only a smell of wet earth and iron. And 3 days after I moved in, a box arrived, addressed to that evil old Willimina Deveraux. The package sat on my kitchen counter for hours while I unpacked boxes labeled wedding stuff in Jake's neat handwriting. Each wine glass we'd picked out together, each one went straight into the trash. And when I finally ran out of things to break, the package was still there. Like it had been waiting for me to be at my very lowest. Like it knew exactly when I'd be desperate enough for any kind of connection, even one that felt wrong. I opened it because at least it was addressed to someone. At least someone wanted something from me. I will live to regret that decision for the rest of my days. I found an awful little wooden man inside, bloated with spindly arms and legs. Its mouth was open in this awful scream that exposed wicked rows of wooden teeth. It smelled like old sweat and dirt, but what really made my stomach turn were my shoes next to the box. Something rattled inside of them. I shook the first shoe, and these tiny little white objects clattered across my floor. Teeth. Dozens of them. And no bigger than rice grains, but perfectly formed, with miniature roots still attached. They were too small to be human, too many to be an animal, and they just kept falling. An impossible number from such a small space until they formed this perfect circle around my feet. The house knew before I did. The temperature dropped so fast that my breath clouded, and all 6 lights in the chandelier blazed bright enough to blind and die, one by one, like candles being pinched out by invisible fingers. And in this sudden dark, I heard something, and it wasn't my heartbeat. The house was humming that song. It was the one that my grandma used to sing. It came from inside the walls. It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around and I finally found somebody who would make me be true. I ran to my bedroom, slamming the door. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone, desperate to call someone, anyone. And that's when I noticed there was something wrong with my background photo. No. All of my photos. In a selfie from last Christmas, there it was. That same wooden figure behind me. In a beach photo from my vacation with Jake 3 years ago, same wooden figure watching from behind a palm tree. Every photo, even ones from before that I moved to New Orleans, showed that twisted little doll lurking in the background and getting closer each time. I threw my phone down and I turned around. That doll sat there on my bed, surrounded by nail clippings and greasy gray hair and what looked like a human tooth. I almost gagged looking at that filth, but before I could even move, it vanished. It must have rolled under the bed, I thought. Dropping to my knees to lift the skirt. At the far end, against the board, I spotted it, and I crawled further under, stretching my fingers out because I almost had it. Suddenly, a blinding pain shot through my hand, and it wasn't just sharp, it was cold. It was like being bitten by something that had died long ago, but it still hungered. I felt its wooden teeth scrape against my bone. I cracked my head on that bed base, scrambling to reverse out of that narrow space, and I was pinned for a moment in that smell of rank meat and wet earth, and my mind was just exploding with panic. And when I finally broke free, I saw these perfect circular puncture marks in my hand, and each one was lined with splinter, like my flesh had been marked by dozens of tiny stakes. I should have packed up my things and left right then, but I second-guessed myself, and I told myself, just calm down. I couldn't believe that a dumb doll could exist and could hold such evil. I truly thought that it was my own broken heart infecting my mind, blaming everything but myself. I was about to find out the truth. I stared at my bleeding hand in the bathroom mirror. 10 years with Jay, and the deepest mark he'd left me was a tan line where my engagement ring used to be. Now, some stranger's cursed doll had drawn first blood. I laughed until I started crying, and then I got angry. I lost my fiance, my apartment, my dignity. But I was not about to let some wooden puppet take my new house too. And that's the thing about hitting rock bottom. You finally have something solid to stand on. I wrapped up my hand in sterile gauze and I fought to steady my heart. I felt dizzy and cold, like all the blood had drained from my veins. I gagged into the toilet several times. White lights dancing in front of my eyes. How could a doll bite me, I thought. But do you even know what a voodoo doll can do? Stuff that tears through my dreams every night to this day. Well, regardless, I was determined to find whatever had taken this divot of flesh from my hand. I grabbed the heavy old outside broom that was left, and I stamped up the stairs to my bedroom. I breathed in deeply, and I swung open that door, and I marched to the bed. I pulled it away from the wall in one giant rush, and holding up that broom, ready to smash whatever came at me. By the corner of the bed frame was a chipped piece of planking twisted up from the damp and time, and with several rusty nails protruding. That's what I cut my hand on, I thought. I sank back on my heels in relief, letting that broom drop with a clatter next to me. If only I had trusted my instincts. I could have run, changed towns, never looked back, but I didn't. Instead, I started to giggle, and then I just burst in hysterical laughter. A voodoo in the mail had ravaged me from under my bed, right, Rebecca? Wiping the tears from my face, I looked closely at that twisted floorboard. The floorboards weren't just warped from water damage, they made these perfect circles. It was like something had been pacing the same route for decades. But they were not here yesterday. And now every night I heard those circular footsteps continue, though I lived alone. And every morning the patterns in the wood had shifted slightly, making new paths, new traps. There was an opening exposed to the black area under the floor. After 3 nights of this, I just couldn't stand it. It couldn't be in my head. It just couldn't. But what I decided to do next made me question the very nature of what we call reality. I shone my phone light into the gap, and I almost lost my mind with fright. There were these 2 beady black eyes. They were staring directly at me, and then these 2 little wooden arms emerged through the hole, followed by this ugly face. And then that filthy doll climbed out. It was about 6 inches high and had a bloated belly atop 2 thin legs, and it just stood silent and still, glaring at me with its black shiny eyes. There was blood around its mouth, my blood, and it was licking at it with a small black tongue. The doll's black eyes stared at me, not through me like Jake's had those last months, but really saw me. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt a sick kind of relief. At least something wanted me. But that thing radiated such evil that I knew it meant to have more of me, that I was facing something inhuman and hungry for blood. I lifted that broom that I had left in my bedroom in a reflex, and fight kicked in over flight. The creature snapped its teeth at me, and then it scuttled back into the hole under the house. I sprung back, and the terror hit me full force, flooding my veins with ice. And I ran from that room, and I slammed that door. My mind was off its rails. I remember clutching at my threads of sanity. My mind was a mad dog, chasing its tail. It couldn't be real, but yet it was. That ugly, disgusting doll was alive. I was stunned. This just didn't happen in the real world. Then a harsh sound made me jump. My heart was racing. It was a harsh, ringing sound coming from the hallway. The old landline, I thought. It was one of the antique furnishings that the old lady had left behind. The ones with the enormous finger dial and those clunky handsets. But surely that thing doesn't still work, I thought. I lurched my frantic way to the black phone. I picked up that enormous handset with numb, shaking fingers. A crackly old voice whispered, "Why did you open the box, woman?" She asked when the package was addressed to me. "Who is this?" I asked, but I knew. It had to be that old woman. The hallway spun in my vision. Willimina Deveraux. I stood in silence, and something fell over in the hall, and my heart jumped in my chest. "I am sorry. It was a mistake. Forgive me," I sobbed. "Please just tell me what it is." My fingers were wound tightly in the old phone cord. My voice was breaking, but Willimina let out this raspy cackle. "It's my little friend, a Gree-Gree. Has he tasted you yet?" she asked me. My hand burned, and it throbbed, and I struggled to speak through my dry throat. "Then it's too late. It has been set in motion," she said. The old witch sounded like she was smiling. And as Willa spoke, I noticed something in the mirror behind me. It was not a reflection, it was a shadow moving wrong. And when I turned, the walls were weeping black fluid in perfect circles. And each drop hit the floor in time with the woman's words. These puddles spelled out, "It had to be you. I'm so sorry that I opened it," I pleaded. "Please, how can I make this thing stop? Why should I help a woman who steals a house from under an old woman?" she asked. "Look, you can have your house back. You can have anything. Please, I am begging you. It's already bitten me. I think it wants to hurt me," I pleaded. In this silence, it seemed to span years, not minutes, and my heart was jumping beneath my ribs as I sobbed into the silent mouthpiece. And then the old woman sighed. You will have to listen very carefully. The creaky voice finally whispered, there may not be much time left for you. Yes? I croaked. You need to trap the puppet by luring it out. Now, listen carefully because you are not going to like this. She sounded like she was smiling as she continued. You need to entice the creature with part of your body. What? I mean, surely you don't mean, could I use like something like nail clippings or hair? I asked. Willa let out a slow and bitter laugh. No, my dear. You have heard the old folks say, a pound of flesh, yes? Oh, a little finger will do. Place the finger in a chalk circle and while it feeds... No, surely you can't be... I interrupted her. While it feeds, she told me. Trace a circle of coarse salt around it. It will be trapped there, and you can place the box inside the circle. But be careful not to smudge the lines. It will go back inside. And the paper from that box, do you still have it? Yes, I said breathlessly. That paper is salt cured and has a powerful containing spell. And then you must give that package to someone else. Only when it finds another friend will it leave you, she finished. What happens if I don't do it? I croaked, breathless. My dear, you will not live long, she said. Why? I saw. Why are you doing this to me? There was this silence. And then she started singing in her warbly voice as if sung by two throats. Because it had to be you. It had to be you. And then the line went dead. I held the phone up to my ear. I was stupefied by what I had just heard. I had to take a shower. And in the shower, water ran black. And when I looked down, these tiny wooden hands were reaching up through the drain, grasping at my feet. And I ran out wrapped in a towel, only to find every faucet in the house trickling the same dark liquid. I was seeing these bright lights, and that's when I realized that I wasn't breathing. The terror was just so immense. My mind rebelled. There was no way I could cut off my own finger. That lady was crazy. It was some kind of game. I just had to think. I tried to redial her, to beg her to help me, to end this, but there was no dial tone. It was just silence. And when I ran my fingers along the cord, the line was slack in my fingers. The phone was not connected to anything. The walls spun around me. And then I grabbed my car keys, phone, and wallet, and I ran from that house. In a daze of terror, I found a motel off Highway 19 in Zachary, and I stumbled into my single room, and I sank into the bed with mind-numbing relief. My bones were heavy as lead. I just needed some sleep to calm my racing thoughts, just so I could make a plan to get rid of whatever that thing was that was stalking me. I thought I'd escape to somewhere normal, but as I lay there, I realized that motels have their own kind of wrong. The wallpaper pattern shifted when I looked away. These little flowers were becoming these screaming faces. The ceiling had water stains that formed the perfect circles, just like the worn patches in my house's floor. And that smell, not just musty motel carpet, it was something older. It was the same wet earth and iron smell that followed the doll. Like the horror had seeped into the walls here too, waiting for me. Or was it a part of me? I was exhausted and thought that bastard doll must be back at the house. I was wrong, but I fell into a deep and fitful sleep. I dreamed that there was an old lady on my bed. She looked grotesque, like her skin wasn't on her face right, and her black eyes were shone with malice in their yellowed sockets, and she was mottled with patches of this rotten skin, and the corners of her mouth oozed a vile black fluid. I tried to get away, but I was frozen. My body would not move. And slowly she placed her liver-spotted hands on either side of my face. And then she started kissing me, her impossibly long tongue probing and pushing past my lips and into my mouth and then deep into my throat. I woke up in terror. I couldn't breathe. Something was actually lodged in my throat. I couldn't draw even one breath. And in a spasm, I coughed a mass up on the bedspread and in front of me, on the white sheet. were several disgusting, greasy gray tufts of hair with filthy, yellowed fingernails. I tried to calm down my racing pulse. I felt unhinged. My mouth was rank and sour, and something was moving, small and dark out of the corner of my eye. A hunched little finger with a bulbous head and spindly little arms and legs. A radio next door rose in volume. The soundtrack of my own personal nightmare. It had to be you. It had to be you. Thinking of you. And then I felt it. A light pressure skidding across my feet and up my body. I let out a shriek and I switched on the lamp next to me, but it did not light. I brailled the dark for my phone. My fingers were numb, fumbling for the flashlight app in that inky black darkness. And I shone the phone light jaggedly over every inch of that bed, the corners of the room. And as that light moved, it seemed every shadow was creeping, scurrying away from the beam. And when I examined the lamp, I saw that the cord had been chewed, nibbled by these sharp little teeth. And in the shadows of the corner of the room, I heard this wheezy little sound from the foot of the bed. It sounded like air escaping from a balloon, or the mad, high-pitched whine of an insect. Was that little bastard laughing at me? I thought, this can't be real. But it was about to become more real than I ever could have imagined in my most bloody nightmare. I was marked by that doll, and the devil does not sleep, as I found out. It leapt at my face in a furious scrabble, and as I grabbed it, I fought it. Impossibly strong, like a mad cat in my hands. It was snapping at my eye. I wrenched it down, and then the pain, the clamp of an impossibly strong little jaw on my cheek just under my eye. And with a burst of panic strength, I pulled that thing from my face, even as it bit at my fingers, and I threw it against the wall, and I ran to the bathroom. My face hot with sticky blood. The world was in a red blur as I slammed that door and I locked it. My lungs were on fire. In the bathroom mirror, a piece of flesh hung open beneath my eye. A circle, the same shape as that monster's jaws. And blood poured out over the white sink and on my shirt. My eyes were wild orbs of terror. I let out a scream at my reflection. It sounded scratched out and hoarse. That's what swallowing fingernails will do, I thought bitterly. I stumbled out of the bathroom, the hallway blurred with my tears, and I could barely breathe as I ran. This thing is going to kill me, I thought. I had to get out of there, but where could I go? I was completely alone, and this thing wasn't human, and it had followed me there. My thoughts turned black as I realized that I was out of options. Grandma said I always had options, but I remembered what the old lady had told me, my blood turning to ice in my veins. I gritted my teeth and I drove back home like a mad woman. I was crying great tearing sobs when my car radio turned itself on and blaring through the speakers so suddenly I almost swerved off the road. It had to be you. It had to be you. You wandered around. Now finally, you found. While the world went about me like normal, under the sunny sky, I went home to make a blood sacrifice to the devil. The house welcomed me back, like a spider welcoming a fly. The front door swung open before I touched it, and all the nails that I pulled from those cabinets were right back in place, arranged in these perfect concentric circles. And the kitchen knives had rearranged themselves from shortest to longest, a tidy row of options for what I needed to do. And even the shadows felt deliberate. They were all stretching toward the meat cleaver, pointing the way. The house knew what was coming. It had seen this before. The hallway was spinning in front of me as I staggered my way to the kitchen. I fumbled in the cupboard, grabbing out my cooking brandy. And I put that bottle to my lips and I swallowed that fire down until I could not breathe. And then I downed some more. This was going to hurt more than anything I'd ever felt. The worst part was that I was about to commit this atrocity on myself. The giddy fumes burned in the air as I fumbled out my meat cleaver and I swallowed hard. Once that burning stopped, my body became calm, almost cold. I watched myself smear brown iodine on the bottom knuckle of my little finger, and then I took out that carving knife, and I placed it right behind the knuckle. Jake always said I never committed to anything. As I picked up the cleaver, I thought about proving him wrong. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to give up a piece of yourself first. Grandma taught me that. My hands started shaking again, but I knew that this was do or die. I leveraged that blade and I pressed down with all my strength, and the cold steel bit through my skin and flesh until it met bone, and with a roar of pure agony, I pressed down all my weight, and finally, blade snapped through the bone and met the bore underneath. That pain was like a fierce cold fire. My nerves were electric wires strumming my body in great strumming chords of agony, and I sobbed as I wrapped my wound in gauze. And I tried not to look at the open stump with the flecks of yellow fat and the slip of pink bone in the center. Holding my hand in the air, I picked up my precious finger with the nail tips still wearing pink polish, and I staggered to the bedroom and I placed that finger in the center of the floor. With my right hand, I drew a half circle, my fingers wobbling and jerking with great shudders. And then I sat back and I waited for that thing. The salt was in a bag next to me, and I held my good hand over my mouth to stop those wheezing sobs that just would not stop. My eyes burned in the gathering dark, and then I heard a scratch from under the bed, a skitter of claws, and a long pause. Come on, you bastard. Come on, I thought. Come and get it, you little coward. And while I waited, hunched in the darkness, my eyes darted everywhere. My panicked mind was picking up shapes wherever my eyes landed. But finally, a black form hobble-hopped from under the bed, moving on bowed little legs in these careful steps. That thing stopped again, the bulb of a head turning on its thin neck like it was smelling the air. I held my breath. Sweat was trickling down the back of my shirt, and my heart throbbed at my chest. I knew that my life depended on what that vile creature would do next, and that wooden man darted toward my severed finger and began ripping into it, letting out these small squeals of pleasure. I crept forward, but the thing did not respond. It was chewing and it was sucking at that finger like it was some exquisite treat. I slowly laid the salt around that thing, and first the top part, and then oh so slowly the top third. The creature paused, and it stiffened in the dark. I prayed it didn't hear my wildly beating heartbeat. It went back to its chewing frenzy, and I could hear its teeth grinding on the bone. My bone, I thought, my 10th finger. The first half of the salt circle was done, and then 2/3. I couldn't help myself. My breath came out in a gasp as I almost closed the last inch, and with a screech, that creature flew at me. In a panic, I put out my injured hand, and that creature sunk its thick lips and bit down with this ferocious strength. And the pain hit me like a truck full of glass, and with the last of my strength, I threw that salt with my other hand, and I closed the circle. That creature let out a hiss and fell back into the circle, and it snapped at the air and it jumped in every direction to find its way out, and then it just stared at me, gnashing its teeth, waving its arms, stamping its little legs in fury. There, you bastard. Got you now, you guilty little runt, I screamed. I placed the box inside the circle, and that coward bolted right inside. I was careful that my knees didn't disturb the circle. I folded the paper and struggled to tighten the string with my one hand, and then I drove until I found a busy intersection. My wounded hand pressed against my chest, and I left that package on a bench at a bus stop. What would you do to save your life? I tell myself someone probably threw it away, that it ended up in a landfill somewhere, buried under tons of garbage. I have to believe that. I can't blame myself, and yet I feel guilty about this every single day. And now, sometimes, when I scroll through social media late at night, I see posts about missing fingers, about people waking up to find perfect circular bite marks on their skin. And each time I trace that scar under my eye, feeling the ridges where those wooden teeth marked me. And God, that song plays more often now. I hear it in elevators, in coffee shops, through my car radio at 3 a.m. when the stations all should be dead. And each time I look for reflections of something small and dark watching me, getting closer. Maybe it's still my heart that can't move on. But then last week I got a package in the mail. No return address, just my name in spidery handwriting that I've seen before. I haven't opened it, but some nights when the house is just too quiet, I sit and I just stare at it. And sometimes I think I hear humming coming from inside. It had to be you. It had to be you. Experts say that Voodoo, also known as Baton, is around 6,000 years old and can be traced back to West Africa. It came to America in the 1700s, carried by African enslaved peoples, and took hold particularly in New Orleans. Over centuries, people have fallen victim to voodoo curses, and the legends of voodoo priestesses like Willimina Deveraux live on even today. One of the most famous spells involve gree dolls, or voodoo dolls, and the practice of ritual sacrifice. According to authoritative sources, these sacrifices require blood and certain body parts including eyes, teeth, fingers, the tongue, or even the heart. Experts suggest that Stone Age Europeans often cut off their fingers during religious ceremonies. And this is why so many of the prehistoric cave paintings show hands with missing digits. Even today, in the South African people of Ngiti tradition, they opt to chop their fingers off and plaster it onto the walls of their hut. They believe that this ritual will save their life from illness or danger. But as voodoo has its origins in Africa, this may shed some light on the experiences of Rebecca Anderson. But not everyone believes in voodoo witchcraft. Rebecca's psychiatrist, Dr. Anna Goldberg, came to this conclusion. The stress of moving out alone and the fragile state of her recovery may have caused delusions. Rebecca has also opted to stop taking her medication for her bipolar disorder. And Rebecca also claimed that Willimina, 83, contacted her by telephone. However, county records reveal that Willimina Deveraux died in the state care facility. And these records also show that she died 2 weeks before Rebecca ever moved into her new home, calling into question who delivered that parcel and who Rebecca supposedly spoke to, claiming to be Deveraux. And the phone Rebecca supposedly received that call from had been out of commission for at least a couple of decades. It also never had any connection point. However, similar cursed dolls have turned up several times over the past 80 years. Some of the recipients were somehow tied to the deceased Willa Deveraux, including her first ex-husband. Connie Gloston was Willa's best friend. A 1966 police report states that she died from an unknown animal attack, and Willa's husband, Frank Deveraux, supposedly died in his sleep from suffocation shortly after. Living relatives speculate that Willa's best friend and husband, they were having an affair at the time. But the voodoo doll package has turned up in other places. People have reported experiencing the curse of the doll on several Reddit forums, mostly by anonymous users for obvious reasons. Our cursed guy 666 posted the following on the forum: "Our witchcraft," which was removed shortly after. And then I opened a package with a dirty wooden idol, and the thing started stalking me. I had to cut off my finger to escape, and now I keep moving to protect my life. Do you believe in the power of curses and voodoo? Have you ever broken a mirror and you had a couple of bad years? Let us know your thoughts. Whether voodoo and curses are still wrecking lives even in this digital age. And please don't forget to like and subscribe for more scary horror stories. And I'll see you in the next video.